everything is alright there. Well, today let's have a conversation or a debate, a highlight debate about the difference or the contrast between the rich and the poor in ancient lives with some examples. And as you may presume, the differences were often starkly characterized by disparities in housing, diet, work, and leisure. And I have some breakdowns here of these differences with some examples. First, let's start with, for example, housing. How housing was different in rich society and in poor society in ancient times. We're gonna start with the rich first. The wealthy lived in spacious, well-built houses, often with multiple rooms and definitely with a courtyard and gardens. For example, in ancient Rome, patricians, which were nobles, lived in grand villas with amenities like marble, mosaic floors, and private baths. The rich in ancient Egypt, the wealthy had large mudbrick estates. Mudbrick estates with high walls, privacy, and well-decorated interior. Well, this is an example how the rich were living in ancient times. But let's have a look on the other side of the society, the poor. How the poor handled those times. In contrast, the poor lived in small or very small, cramped, constructed homes, mostly with one room, where lived about 1 or 2 families in the same room. Another example, in ancient Rome, the plebeians lived in insulae, apartment buildings that were overcrowded, poorly ventilated, and prone to collapse, fire, and other diseases. Well, if the rich have their own private baths, well, this didn't happen to be found on the poor society. Well, the poor often they used other means to maintain their hygiene. Well, in Egypt, for example, the laborers and farmers lived in the basic shacks, or one mud brick houses with no ventilation sometimes. Well, this was the chapter related to housing. Now, let's move next to the diet. Yes. Again, we're gonna start with the rich one. The wealthy people enjoyed lavish diet across meats with access to meat, mostly exotic fruits and spices, and wine. In ancient Rome, banquets featured dishes like roasted peacock and imported delicacies wealthy nobles consumed pork, rice, fish, and flavored different types of dishes. In the contrast, the diet of the poor was simple, mostly made out, for example in China, by rice, only rice, or bread in ancient Europe kingdoms, relying heavily on staple foods. For example, Roman plebeians primarily ate porridge, bread, porridge, and milk, and rarely affording meat. Well, the plebeians sometimes lived an entire life without tasting a single bite of meat. Meat was only destinated for the wealthy ones. Only the wealthy ones have access to meat dishes or meat-based dishes. Egyptian farmers relied on bread and beer, onions and lentils, with meat being a rare luxury. Well, I said beer. Well, beer was not a luxury beverage. At that point, beer was considered a meth. Yes, a meth, and was responsible for treating many diseases of that times, especially dysentery. Alright. Now, until now, we have checked out the housing of the different social statuses, the diet, and let's move to the next chapter, the work. The wealthy ones first. Well, the wealthy ones enjoys the diverse roles in administrative or public sector, land management, and did not perform manual hard labor. For example, in ancient Rome, senators and equestrians controlled estate businesses, and with slaves who did the labor for them. As well, the landlord they had the same role. In feudal Japan, samurai and nobles lived off the work of peasants and focused on governance, art, and warfare. In the contrast, the poor labor was completely different, where the poor were responsible for all manual labors and the hard work performed in the fields, workshops, constructions, and so on. In ancient Egypt, farmers toiled on lands owned by nobles and pharaohs, and they were responsible, the poor one, they were responsible for rising up, erecting monuments and pyramids during seasons. In ancient Europe, peasants worked the land in exchange of protection. But with a cost, they were heavily taxed by the lords. Right. Done with this chapter now. The next one is education and knowledge. The wealthy one first. Wealthy family had access to formal educations, tutors, libraries, teachers, enabling them to pursue philosophy, science, and other arts. In ancient Greece, the elite could study under the leading of famous philosophers like Plato or Aristotle. For example, in ancient India, the upper castes were taught the Vedas and other texts, while the lower castes were completely excluded. Now, in the other side of the society, the poor, education for the poor was minimal and non-existent in some societies and civilizations, with children often learning skills and experience only from their fathers and families. Literacy rates was very low among the lower classes, limiting their opportunities for social mobility. Another fact is that, for example, in some societies and civilizations, access to religious buildings and monuments for the poor was sometimes forbidden or banned by some rules, and only a few of them were granted access to those kind of buildings and shrines. Okay, and now the wearings, clothing and appearance. The wealthy one. The wealthy wore fine, elaborately designed clothing from expensive materials like silk, linen, wool, and dyed colors. Well, this was a status symbol. The appearance was a status symbol of the one who wore. Roman elites donned togas made from high quality fabrics like senators and equivalents. In ancient Egypt, nobles adorned themselves with gold jewelry and makeup, symbolizing their status and beauty. The poor ones, on the other side, the poor wore simple, practical clothing made from linen or coarse materials. For example, Roman plebeians wore plain tunics, and sandals were a luxury. Egyptian laborers wore linen clothes or simple dresses with no adornment. Good. Next chapter. Entertainment. The rich. Entertainment. The elite enjoyed activities like theater, hunting, and other sports. In Rome, the rich had private seats reserved in the Colosseum and in organized feasts. In ancient China, nobles enjoyed poetry, music, and games. In contrast, on the other side, the poor one, let's see how kind of entertainment they could access. Leisure was poor for the leisure was almost not present for the poorest one, or limited in communal festivals, religious events, or simple games. Roman plebeians watched gladiators' games in public arenas, which were free to attend. Yes, the plebeians had free access to public arenas only to watch gladiators fight. Time for recreation was scarce due to the long working hours, because the poor or the unwealthy, they worked day and night in different shiftings. The last chapter I want to touch and discuss is related to the religion and burial practices, because here are some interesting highlights that I want to expose. Of course, we're going to start with the rich first. Well, it's not an order, it's just a random order. The wealthy, grand burial sites had elaborated rituals of burial. Some examples, there obviously in ancient Egypt, pharaohs and nobles were entombed in pyramids and lavishly decorated tombs with treasures and artifacts buried with them. In Rome, ancient Rome, the wealthy had elaborate mausoleums or family tombs. Now, on the other side, let's have a look how the poor were buried. The poor had simple burials, often graves, unmarked graves, or communal cemeteries. Egyptian workers and farmers, they were buried with only basic goods. If is that compared to the grandeur of the nobles, Roman plebeians might be cremated and placed in columbaria, shared burial vaults. Oh yes, that was quite interesting, right? Especially this last chapter related to burials and religion. It's like in every in every ages of history, as a conclusion is that the lives of the rich and the wealthy and the poor in ancient times were defined by the inequalities, and in almost every aspect of life. Because, of course, it's like in medieval ages, like in the modern ages, even in ancient times, the elite ones, the wealthy ones, enjoyed different privileges, comforts, and opportunities, and the poor lived in harsh conditions, and mostly the poor were used to do the hard work for the wealthy ones. This divides underscores the rigid class structures of our historical society, shaped in many ancient civilizations. Well, I like this. I don't know what I like this ASMR sessions. What's your opinion? So, please express your opinion in the comments section below, and I will try to respond to all of your comments. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I wish you all the best. Bye bye. Soms like there's a comment. Estoy